Welcome. This is the study guide for Unit 7. I'm going to go through pretty quick, but you can fast forward this video at any time you need to. First one says find the midpoint. To find the midpoint, all we need to do is we need to take the x's, which is -5 and 9, add them together and divide by 2. And then we're going to take the y's, which is -2 and a -4, add them together, divide by 2. So this is 4 divided by 2, which means I'm going to get 2. This next one is going to be -6 divided by 2, which is -3. The following one, the way I like to set it up is I would go endpoint, midpoint, endpoint, because you're given an endpoint and the midpoint. The midpoint is 5, 3. One endpoint is -9. So if I'm thinking from a -9 to a 5, how many units did we move? We moved +14. So if I move another +14 units, where are we at? We are at 19. Whereas with the same thing for the y's, if we are at, say, a -1, and we are moving from -1 to 3, we moved 4 units. We went up 4 units, and again, if I go up plus 4 units, where are we at? We are at 7. So we have, our answer is, where is that other endpoint? It is 19, 7. Next one, we got to use the distance formula. Sorry, there was a typo right here. Again, for me, I like to label it as x1, y1, x2, y2. And when we plug them into the formula, which is x2 minus x1, which is just 2, squared, plus y2, which is a -3, minus y1, which is 4, squared, and this is all underneath the square root. So this is -10 squared, which is 100, plus this is -7 squared, which is 49. And so we are going to get the square root of 149. And that comes out to be a decimal. It says round it to the nearest hundredth. So if I take the square root of 149, nearest hundredth, I'm going to get a 12.21. Next one says a square. The thing you got to know about a square is a square has all right angles. And so these are all right angles. When it says ABD, well, we want a part of it. So just like a rhombus, these angles are cut in half so that this is a 45-degree angle. It's 45 and 45. The next one, problem number 5, says BEC. BEC, that this is a 3x plus a 9. And we want to figure out what x is. Well, again, remember, we just said that this angle is 45 and this angle is 45, and that is a triangle. And we know that for triangles, that the three angles, 3x plus 9, plus the other two 45s, which is 90, is going to equal 180 degrees. Okay, so if I get, this pen's kind of, if I get a 3x plus a 9, equals a 90, and so I'm going to get 3x equals 81. And let's see, 81 divided by 3 is going to mean that my answer is x equals a 27. The next one says, find the perimeter of ABCD if it's 56. And so there's two ways you could do it. Remember, for this says that it's a square. Thing you got to remember is that all four sides of the square, 2x plus 4, 2x plus 4, and 2x plus 4, that the four sides to a square are all the same. Okay, so you could have done 4 times 2x plus 4 is going to equal 56. Or you could have taken 56 and divided by 4 and set that equal to 2x plus 4. It doesn't really matter which way that you take, though. But we're going to get an 8x plus a 16 equals a 56. And then if we take 56 minus a 16 and then divided by 4, that's going to give us x equals 10. All right, next one. It says that these are all a parallelogram. So it says JN. So JN and JL, The thing is, remember JN, that for a parallelogram, it's bisected, so that this is half. So if this half is 11, then the other half is 11. And if the whole thing is this 4x minus 2, then if 11, 11, that combines to be 22. So if you add that over, you're going to get 4x equals 24, which means that x is going to equal 6. The following one, it says mn. Okay, if mn, and let me just clear this really quick. If mn is 2x plus 3, and nk, well, again, we just said right here that it's bisected, right? That these two are going to be the same. So if this is mn and this is nk, then we know that these two lengths, because it's a parallelogram, have to be equal to each other. So I'm going to subtract that over. I'm going to get a 3x. Add that over. I'm going to get a 12, which means that x is going to equal 4. Next one says JM. JM is this length, and KL, which is this length. We know that opposite sides are going to be equal to each other. So I'm going to take 4x minus 7 equals 6x minus 11. And if we solve for this, again, if I bring that 4x over, it's going to give me a 2x. If I add that over, add the 4 over, that's going to give me what? A minus 2. Oh, this is 11. Huh. Sorry, I wrote that down wrong. Minus, so it's plus 11. So it's going to give me plus a 4. That way I don't get a decimal. X is going to be equal to 2. The following one, it says JML is 84, JML. So this whole thing is 84. And it asks for what MJK are. Well, the thing is, you know that opposite angles are congruent. So like that would be 84. And these are called consecutive angles when they're on the same side. Because remember, they are same side interior angles. And so same side interior angles are always going to add up to 180. Which means if you take 180 minus 84 means that this is going to be 96. Number 11. 11 says JLM. JLM, that this is 29. And it says JNM. JNM, that this is 80. Okay, again, I know that alternate interior angles are congruent. So if this is 29, then this other angle over here has to be 29. And I know that these make a straight line, which is 180 degrees. So if that one is 80, then that one on the inside has to be 100. And our goal is to find out what this JKN, what that angle right there is a dot, what that is. And again, we see that we have a triangle. And we know that triangles always add up to 180 degrees. So if I take 180 minus 29 minus, and that was 100, equals, so 180 minus 100 minus 29 means that that angle has got to equal 51 degrees. All right, next one, we're talking about rectangles. It says PR, that diagonal, and QS, that diagonal. One of the key things is you have to know that diagonals are for rectangles are always the same, which means I'm going to set these equal to each other, which if I subtract it over, I'm going to get a 6x equals. If I add the 4 over, that's going to equals 12, which means that x equals 2. Next one says QPT. QPT, this angle right here is a 36, and it wants to know what TQR is. TQR, well, again, you got to know though that these are going to add up to 90. And the other thing is you have to know that these are all the same. Well, remember, this is an isosceles triangle where you know that because these two angles are congruent, for an isosceles triangle, the base angles are always the same. So if this is 36 here, that's got to be 36 here. And that's not what it's asking for because we want to know what this TQR, what this one on the other side is. But again, because you know that it's a rectangle and that these are a right angle, this angle has to be 54 because 54 and 36 add up to be 90. So this is 54 degrees. Okay, the next one says that PR, I don't know how I just did this. PR. Uh, PR is the whole thing is 14. So this whole thing here is 14. And it says that SR, this whole thing right here is 7. And we want to figure out what QR is. Well, again, if I see here, this is a right angle, and this is an X. If I have 2 or 3 sides, then I can use Pythagorean theorem, where x squared plus 7 squared is going to equal 14 squared, which means that x squared plus 49 equals 14 times 14 is 196. 196, and 196 minus not 14 but 49 is 196 minus 49 is going to give me 147 equals 147. If I take the square root of that though, yep, if I take the square root of that, we're going to get a decimal. That's not fun. 12.1, right? And so if this side is a 12.1, then this other side has to be the same, because for a rectangle, opposite sides are always congruent. So this other side also has to be a 12.1. All right, next it says that these are a rhombus. So if it says BAC, if this angle right here is a 3x minus a 1, and if it says ABC, ABC, that this whole thing is 80. Again, there's a couple ways I can do it. Well, remember, opposite angles are always the same. So if this is 80, that one's 80. It doesn't help me though. But if this is 80, then these are consecutive angles, which means that this has to be 100. So again, you could have taken that 100 and cut it in half, or you know that because these angles are congruent, that there's 2 of them, and so you're going to have 3x minus 1, and these 2 are going to be the same, and that's going to be equal to 100, which means you're going to get a 6x minus a 2 equals 100, and add it over, you're going to get 102, and if you take a 102 divided by 6, means that you're going to get x is going to be equal to 17. Okay, the next problem, I think there was a typo. I don't really know what it's saying. Obviously, I think this is saying it's a rhombus. It tells me that DC is 13, and it wants to know the perimeter. Again, there had to be a typo somewhere. Well, if it's the perimeter, you know that all 4 sides are the same. So if I take 13, if I times it by 4, the perimeter's got to be 52. Following one, it says that this is an isosceles trapezoid. So isosceles trapezoid, you know, if you take the top, which is 9, take the bottom, which is a 25, you add them together, so 9 plus 25, then divided by 2, that's going to equal that middle line. So 25 plus 9 divided by 2 means that middle line is going to be 17. Okay, but on the next one, it's the same thing, or if I take the top, which is 2x plus 3, and the bottom, which is that 6x minus a 9, if I add those together, 2x plus 3 plus 6x minus 9, and you divide it by 2, that's going to equal the middle. And they tell us in this problem that the middle is 13. Middle is 13. So we're going to solve. I'm just going to combine like terms. I'll put this in blue because this is kind of getting all over the place. That's going to be a 8x minus 6 all over 2 equals a 13. You could divide these because they're both divisible by 2, but for most people, I would say just multiply this 2 on over to cancel it out, right? Cancels out. Kind of all over the place. 8x minus 6 equals a 26. Add that over. So I'm going to get 8x equals a 32. 32 divided over, which means that x is going to equal to 4. Cool. I'm going to erase this to clear up some space. Next one says, if angle A is a 118, then what is angle C? Thing is, you got to know that, remember, base angles are always going to be the same. And these are consecutive angles. Consecutive angles for a trapezoid are always going to add up to 180, which means that this is 62. And just like here, base angles are always going to be the same. If that's 62, this one over here is also going to be the same, which is 62. 20. 20 says D is 8x plus 8 in C. Again, you got to know that base angles are always going to be the same. So what are you going to do here? You're going to go 18x plus 8 is going to be equal to 11x plus 15. Subtract the x over, 7x equals subtract the 8 over 7, which means that x equals 1. Okay, time for our favorite problems, last two. It wants to know, is this just a parallelogram? So we could do this a couple different ways. It says we could use distance and or slope. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to see is if I like the slope formula, doesn't really matter. I mean, I can find the distance of the opposite sides. You see here, the first thing I think did was draw it so I can get a good shape. But I'm going to try and find out, is the slope of SQ, is it the same, which would mean it's parallel to SR? And so I'm going to use the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so when I do that, again, I have P and I have Q. And so I'm going to do it off to the side here. Again, I like to label it as x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to get a 7 minus y1, which is 4, over a x2, which is a negative 2 minus a negative 6, which is going to give me double negative becomes a positive, which is a 3 over a 4. Okay, that was for PQ. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put it in orange, and I'm going to do it for SR. SR, again, if I take y2, I'm going to get a negative 3 minus a 0 over a x2, negative 5 minus a negative 1, which is going to give me a negative 3 over, and then this is a negative 4, but a negative divided by negative is a positive. Okay, so what do I notice about these two slopes? They are the same, which means that these two lines are parallel. Okay, so that helps me. I'm right there. But I also need to prove that these other two lines, which are PS and QR, that those are parallel. So again, I know it's kind of getting all over the place. I have it in different colors. I'm going to do this one in blue, which is P and S. So if I'm doing the slope of that, I'll do it right down here, which is going to give me a negative 3 minus a 4 over a negative 5 minus a negative 6. Double negative becomes a positive. Become a positive, which I'm going to get a negative 7 over a positive 1, which is a negative 7. And then I'm going to do this O1 over here as well. Let's do it in black. No, I don't like black. Let's do pink. Pink as the last one right here, which is QR. So I have QR. If I have Y2, which is 0 minus 7 over a negative 1 minus a negative 2. Double negative becomes a positive. This is going to give me a negative 7 over positive 1. And look, negative 7. This is a negative 7, which means that these two sides are also parallel, which means, is this a parallelogram? Yes. Is that the only way you could have done it? No, you could have done distance formula. Distance for the top two, see if they're the same. Distance for the left two, see if those are the same. And yes, it would have been, and you would get a parallelogram. All right, last problem. This one wants to know, is it a parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, or a square? Given following. First thing I always do, I always graph it out. Try and see one, and I label it next to it, A, B, C, and D. Okay. For me, I like to use I think slope is an easier formula. So for me, if I can, I think I'm going to see if it is. I think this looks more like a rhombus. So what I'm going to do with a rhombus is I'm going to see if these two diagonals, if they are perpendicular. Because if they're perpendicular, they're going to make a right angle, which means I'm going to do the slope formula for A and C, which means I'm going to get for A and C, I'm going to get negative 9 minus a negative 4 over a 8 minus a 3. Double negative becomes a positive. Negative 5 over 5, which is going to give me a negative 1. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing for B and D, which is going to give me a negative 11 minus a negative 2 over a 1 minus a 10. Double negative becomes a positive, which is going to give me a negative 9 over negative 9 over a negative 9, which is going to give me a positive 1. Cool. So again, these are our fraction really negative 1 over 1, and this is really a positive 1 over 1, which means, yes, one's a negative, one's a positive. They are reciprocals. This is going to be a 90-degree angle. Awesome. Which means, what does that mean? It's either going to be a rhombus or it's going to be a square, right? So I got to figure out, well, it's not just a rectangle only. It's got to be one of these two. Now, which one is it? Could it be a square? Well, I'm like, it could be a square. I could do a couple different things. I could figure out if all four sides are the same. But for me, I'm just going to see, well, if these two diagonals, if that diagonal and that blue diagonal, if they are the same length, that would have the attributes of a rectangle. And remember, a square is just a rectangle or rhombus combined together. So I'm going to do the distance formula between BD and AC. If those are the same, then it's going to be a square. If they are different numbers, then it's just going to be a rhombus only. So I'm going to do the pink one first between B, this one, and D. And let's do it over here. Distance formula is x2, which is 1 minus 10, that's squared, plus y2, which is 1 minus a negative 2 squared, and this is all underneath the square root. Your distance formula, which is negative 9 squared plus double negative becomes a positive. This is a 3 squared, which is 81 plus a 9, which is 90. Keep the square root of 90. All right, so that was for the pink one. We'll do the same thing for the blue one, which is B, A, C. I'm trying to figure out is these two. Okay, so again, we're doing the same thing. X1, which is 8 minus x2, 3. Take that, we're going to square it, plus y2, which is negative 11, minus a negative 4, square it, and take this, and this is all underneath the square root. This is going to be a 5 squared plus double negative becomes a positive. That is a negative 7. Negative 7 squared, which is 25 plus 49. And 25 plus 49 is 74. All right, so I'm looking. Is rad 90 the same thing as rad 74? No. Hopefully I didn't make a mistake there. I know it's going quick though, which means that it can't be a rectangle. And if it can't be a rectangle, then it can't be a square. So what is the best shape for this? It's a rhombus. You have to know the characteristics of it in order to do it. And again, reminder, what characteristics does it have? There's a bunch of different ways you could have done it. How did I do it? To recap it, I figured out, is it a rhombus? Yes, because diagonals are perpendicular. Then I try and figure out, well, was it also a square, right? Or a rectangle? A rectangle has diagonals that are congruent. Diagonals are not congruent, which means that is why it's not a square, had to be a rhombus. Cool? All right, let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll see you guys all soon.